Welcome back to Cultivate Talk. Today, we're exploring the world of strategic communication, how organizations build trust, navigate crises, engage communities, and tell stories that make an impact. My guest is Kelli Matthews, a professor in the School of Journalism and Communication at the University of Oregon, and the founder and managing director of Verve Northwest Communications. For more than 2 decades, Kelli has worked at the intersection of communication theory and practice, helping organizations tackle complex challenges through strategic messaging, media relations, digital communication, crisis response, and community engagement. In this conversation, we discuss what effective communication looks like in today's rapidly evolving media environment, how organizations can communicate more clearly during high-stakes moments, and why trust remains one of the most valuable assets any organization can build. We also explore the changing role of storytelling, the skills future communicators need to develop, and the ways communication can create meaningful change in communities and organizations alike. If you've ever wondered what separates good communication from truly impactful communication, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Well, thank you so much for coming on to Cultivate Talk today to talk with me, Kelli Matthews. I'm super excited to have you here today. And I have been following your work for a while now, and I'm just continuously so interested and also very impressed by everything that you have on your plate and manage to do what seems like constantly. So I do really appreciate your time. How are you doing today?
Great. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I'm really excited about this. I think I'm not even sure we've done virtual connection before. I think it's all just been on social, yeah?
I think so, yeah. So this is actually an awesome opportunity to actually get to virtually connect with you as well after all of these years. So we're going to go ahead and get into all the fabulous things that you do. So you have spent 2 decades in strategic communications across both academia and practice. What first drew you to this field?
Question. First of all, it feels weird to say I've been doing anything for 2 decades. That's clearly I'm a child prodigy. That's not
Obviously, yes,
obviously.
absolutely.
Um, when I started, I did my bachelor's degree in the School of Journalism and Communications at the U of O. And when I started there, I was a non-traditional transfer student and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to do advertising because it was more visible to me. I thought that's what I wanted to be creative. I wanted to, or what I thought was creative, what I saw or understood as creativity. And I remember sitting in a large kind of intro to public relations class, and the instructor at the time was kind of describing sort of a day in the life, I guess, was kind of the way he was approaching it. And while this is going to seem very, early 20s, a little bit shallow in terms of decision making, he described it as never having the same day twice and always having something new and always doing something different. And to me, that, first of all, that was appealing because I'm very curious and love trying new things and love learning new things. And so that appealed to me. And then I started to understand the connection between why that was true, right? Why every day is different when we work in communications and the concept of really finding the right stories for the right people at the right time, was exactly it. I'm like, oh, that's what it's called. That's what this thing that I want to do is called. I didn't even know what it was. And so my path from there has been pretty linear in terms of my draw to communications. I truly love what I do. I love the work that I do. I love teaching it. And so and no 2 days are the same. So it never gets boring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you love what you do because that is not surprising to me because of the way that it shines through in your work. So it's very evident that you love what you do. And I
Thank
think
you.
that's wonderful when that happens for people. So you practice roles as both a professor and a practitioner. How do those two worlds inform each other in your work?
Oh gosh, I feel like they tie very closely together. So my consulting life and my client work informs daily informs the work that I do in classes. It helps me bring real world scenarios to the room. It helps me bring kind of the life experience and the career experience. It's there's no ivory towers here. It's very hands on. And vice versa. You know, I spend a lot of time, and even though the generations have changed, a lot of time with people in their early 20s. Some of those people are now in their early 40s, but they were in their early 20s when they were in my classroom. So understanding that kind of taste-making generation has always been useful to my clients. And of course, just needing to stay kind of on the cutting edge of things, of research and of practice, has informed both. My clients know that I take them into my classroom and that they're fodder for classroom conversation. And my students know that I talk to my clients about the work that we do in class. And so I think one really informs the other. I had a brief stint as just a few years as a kind of quasi-administrator on an academic side. And it was in that moment that I realized how closely tied my teaching was to my practice, because being an academic administrator is not the same. And so it was a steeper learning curve than I thought, because I was like, oh, this is admin, this is different, this is operations, and this isn't PR, this isn't what I do, this is something different. And so I enjoyed that as well, and did a fine job at it, but it really struck me in that moment how closely tied my practice is to my teaching and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the interesting things about academia, right? Is like whatever we do outside of academia can often find its way back to
Absolutely.
academia itself. And I find that incredibly useful when I'm trying to connect with students or need an example or telling stories. It can be incredibly useful and helpful. So I kind of love how it's connected to everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're
Yeah.
very closely connected for me.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned always asking what works. How do you define effective communication in today's constantly shifting media landscape?
Oh, well, that constantly shifts for part of it. Part of the answer is just understanding how those shifts are happening, understanding how people are receiving messages, how they're receiving messages, how that resonates, how that resonance changes over time. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree and was prepared for a career in public relations, it was, I was trained to do a different job tactically. I mean, the core is very similar. The core
Yeah.
of communications and the core of strategy is very similar, but the tools have changed pretty dramatically. And so that has required me and anyone who does this work requires us over the course of the last couple decades to be pretty quick on our feet to be able to figure out how is this changing. I also, as maybe a typical journalism major, thought I hated math, and so avoided it very clear, like no way, no math for me. And have learned over time, have had to teach myself, because if I do a lot of my work in digital and social strategy, and that has a lot of analytics and a lot of understanding of how the data work. And so that has been something that I've had to teach myself, and so have brought that into my classroom and said, hey, guess what? You don't get to be afraid of math. You have to understand quantitative assessments. Like, that's part of our job, and those assessments are going to inform whether you get a budget, or whether you keep your job, or whether your department has some success and some longevity with its strategies and plans. And so it's incredibly important. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to get people to do something, right? Either to know something new, to believe something, to change their attitude, to make an action. And so if understanding how your strategies are moving towards those objectives and helping you accomplish those metrics and measurements is an ongoing learning opportunity for those of us in communications, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny you bring up the math thing because I was definitely that comm major that avoided math. And like I can remember my last math class in my undergraduate. And then when I got to grad school and I had to actually face like quantitative measures and do that, I was like, I thought I escaped this. Like why is this coming back to me?
It
So
was
it never
so
really
intimidating in
escaped.
grad school.
You're right. Like you
But
just
also there was practical application, which helped. Like
yes.
it helped that I was like not just doing algebra or
This is
pre-calculus.
true.
Like
I felt like I
that
was
was
doing
abstract to
yeah,
me.
it was helpful math at least, but it
Yes,
was
but it was still
definitely like
intimidating.
a very direct moment where I was like, "Oh, yikes." Like I thought I was done with this and avoided it.
Yeah.
I was doing qualitative, like I don't need this. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it came back. It came
Same.
back full circle for me. So that is absolutely a thing.
For sure.
So your work focuses on turning complexity into clarity. What does that process look like when you're helping an organization refine its message?
For me, it's getting a lot of input. It's getting a it's that curiosity that I spoke of is comes into play, right? Where I have to really understand something, often something new to me. If I'm helping to distill information or I'm helping to create that clarity, I have to understand it, and I have to be able to figure out how to communicate that to an audience that chances are probably coming in from the same perspective I am, that I'm not sure about this, I don't understand this, I need some help to know it. So for me, that's a lot of input. It's reading, it's listening, it's watching, it's digging through sources, it's talking to people who are experts in that field so that they can help me understand the thing that I'm trying to talk about. I'm just starting a project with a new client that is going to require, this is top of mind because this is going to require me to think about an industry that I don't have a ton of experience in. And it's requiring me to think about, where do I get that information? How do I ask smart questions? How do I find the information I can find? And then bring the smart questions to the team so that they can help me refine those the way that I'm thinking about it. It's fascinating to me because I'm super curious and I love learning a little bit about a lot of different things. It's probably why academia suits me well, and communication and public relations suits me well, is that I get to be a little bit of an expert on a lot of different things. My sister calls me a lint trap of information. So I'm always grabbing random facts and I'm remembering these random things. But I love it. And I love it because it helps me to figure out how to distill these complicated topics into message points and talking points and headlines and key language on social content and captions and things like that. So it's probably one of my favorite parts of communication is learning the new thing and then figuring out how to tell somebody else about it.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. And that's so well articulated. Absolutely. So, at Verve Northwest Communications, you work across digital strategy, media relations, and crisis communication. What are some common communication mistakes organizations make in high stake moments?
Mm, I would, oh gosh, there are so many. Frankly, one of them is not communicating or being reluctant to communicate. A lot of issues can be managed before they turn into crises, for example. If an organization is willing to talk about it and acknowledge that there are issues and think through how do we respond to those issues. Being slow to respond is a big problem with a lot of organizations. If you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell it for you. And so keeping that in mind really on any kind of communication, whether it's proactive and positive or you're dealing with an issue, kind of a negative issue, or trying to navigate a crisis, you have to tell your own story. And sometimes that means leading with bad news, right? You don't always, your story isn't always a good news story. Sometimes you have yucky things you have to talk about. And that's where a lot of organizations get reluctant about talking about, they don't want to say yucky things. They want to be positive and they want to be promotional. I think I heard this description at a conference many, many years ago. I wish I could remember who to credit, but I can't. I just borrowed it whole cloth. But every communications team needs both promoters and protectors. And promoters are the out getting new people in, providing, promotional kind of opportunities for the organization. But you also got to have protectors, and those protectors are always looking out for your reputation, looking out for the potential issues or landmines in the way of effective communication. They're also sometimes the party poopers that don't get, which makes it challenging to bring protectors onto a team sometimes. Because sometimes I will say we, because I'm a protector, kind of my nature is as a protector. Sometimes I'm not very fun, so I'm like, we can't do that, or this is going to go badly, or think about how that is going to be perceived, and so that can be challenging to listen to those folks who are really kind of the conscience of the organization, and being able to say, wait a minute, what's the worst thing that could happen if we make this decision? And if you don't have somebody in the room who can ask that question, find someone, because so many mistakes that I see are from organizations that don't have that mindset, or don't have the ability to say, oh wait, what's the worst that could happen? Let's play this out from a negative perspective and see if we're really have all of our ducks in a row, and make sure that we're appropriately ready for if there's pushback, or maybe we don't do this strategy. Maybe we think of something else. If that, tabletop exercise, what's the worst that could happen, think it through, that tabletop exercise goes wrong, that gives you a chance to fix it and gives you a chance to recalibrate before it goes out into the public.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about, well, I love everything that you just said, but I love what you said in particular about how sometimes the problem is people not communicating at all. Because I think that's like the pinpoint of what it comes back to very often when we think about conflict and crisis communication in probably all contexts, is like it can be the root of it is the fact that no one was communicating at all, or the people who needed to communicate weren't communicating. And it's so
Yeah,
simple because people automatically think it's like this complex issue, I think, right off the bat. But it's actually can be whittled down to something incredibly simple, such as that, is that there was
yeah,
no communication or not enough.
yeah. Works in our personal lives as well, right?
Exactly.
Whether it's interpersonal or organizational communication.
Absolutely, yes, this is true. Personal and professional, all areas of
Yeah.
communication. Absolutely. So, crisis communication is something many organizations struggle with. What separates a response that builds trust from one that damages it?
Crisis communication that builds trust is really about being transparent and authentic. And those words are kind of buzzy, and so I'll break them down just a little bit from my perspective. I think transparent just means that you're holding yourselves and each other accountable, and that you're willing to share process, you're willing to share decision making, you're willing to share strategy to the degree that you can. Now, transparent doesn't mean, open the doors and everybody come in and look under the bed and rifle through your drawers. Like, that's not transparency in a business context. Transparency in a business or organizational context is really about helping your stakeholders understand that decision making process. And not all stakeholders get the same amount of transparency. Where employees you might need a higher degree of transparency as a kind of a core stakeholder for your organization. Somebody in the general public may not have that. That may not be necessary. And then authenticity, I would say, is really about being true to who your organization is, being true to who you are as a leader. As a spokesperson, in a crisis situation, you are a leader. You're the face of the organization, and you have to be authentic. You have to be your authentic self. You have to represent your organization authentically, and those pieces sometimes turn into sort of canned messages and overprotective postures. I've worked with plenty of amazing attorneys and lawyers in crisis communication situations. I can also look at a lot of organizations who are not dealing well with crises and point at when they are legal-led as opposed to communication-led crises, because you can tell they're just protecting their liability and they're protecting against risk. you have to do that, right? A good communications person is not going to put your organization at legal risk, but sometimes you have to be able to say more than your general counsel wants to say, and so being able to kind of negotiate that environment while protecting your organization from unnecessary risk, but also owning mistakes or owning decisions, and being able to do so in a really human way and not a like canned message protective posture way.
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. So you also work closely with nonprofits and community organizations. How does communication strategy differ when the goal is engagement and trust rather than profit and visibility?
I mean, the short answer is it doesn't, right? We're always trying to get people to do things when we work in communication, and there's a verb in that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's vote, sometimes it's donate, sometimes it's show up, sometimes it's buy, sometimes it's no. I think that nonprofits and community organizations have a little more inherent trust kind of baked in because of their understood mission and their focus on helping the community. But I've also watched lots of organizations tank that trust for the same reasons that companies or for-profit organizations do, that they're not being transparent, that they're not being authentic, that they're not treating their employees well, that they're not showing up in the community the way that they're not meeting the expectations of their stakeholders, and that gap between the stakeholders' expectancy and their behavior is often where organizations fail. So if I expect you as a nonprofit to provide housing for unhoused folks in the area, and you misspend your grant money, or you don't show up and provide accountability for the money that people have donated, or your housing is not safe, like that violates what I expect from you. And when you violate that expectancy, little academic jargon for us here today, violate that expectancy, that's when organizations fall down. Like that has to match. If I'm flying on an airplane, my basic expectancy is that I show up on the other end safe and sound. You violate that's a crisis, right? So there's it's a pretty straightforward concept, but organizations need to define what it is that their stakeholders expect from them. Like, that's a two-way street. You don't get to continue to exist if your stakeholders say you can't exist anymore. Like, that's a kind of a basic tenet, right? If people stop buying from you, you go out of business. People stop donating to you, you go out of business. That has to be seen as a two-way street.
Yeah. And also a really good explanation of the fact that they aren't that different, because I do feel, in terms of like just thinking of them at the surface level, there's often this like differentiation between the two in regard to how they communicate with the community and with those interested in them or wanting to support them. But really, they're actually hand in hand. Unlike what, again, like that surface level kind of communicates. So
Yeah.
fascinating. So, with the rapid evolution of digital media, how have you seen the role of storytelling change in strategic communication?
Gosh, storytelling is a word that we love to use in the journalism school to start with, for good reason, right? And I mean, we're
Right.
humans and we're wired for story. Like at our evolutionary basics, we're wired for story, and so we have to. I think that digital has really highlighted that. I don't know that storytelling as a concept has ever diminished in terms of in terms of the way that organizations should be approaching how they talk to their stakeholders. I would say that digital has probably highlighted the need for story, right? That if there's and understanding what that means, and understanding that story is not once upon a time there was an organization. I mean, it's not that kind of story, right? But it's the ability to connect with people on a human level, and connect with people at our most kind of evolutionarily basic level, right? That storytelling is crucial. I think that probably digital has driven that because it's people connecting with people. Social media at its best and highest use is the idea that you can build communities of interest and you can find other people who are interested in the thing that you are. There are lots of dark alleys that will spin off from that concept. Just by my utopic view, and I will maintain that utopic view, is that the best and highest use is building those communities of interest. When I was, pre-social media, your community were the people who were around you in your neighborhood.
Right.
That was it. Like, that was a proximity community. Now I can find people who are interested in the thing that I'm interested in anywhere in the world, and do all the time. I have communities of interest I participate in and are active in, and they're not people that I would have connected with in person. No way. I have, lots and lots of people who I don't know outside of my digital connections and outside of those communities of interest. And so that humans connecting with humans, I think, has driven that storytelling emphasis. As brands and people who do marketing and communication, we sort of have to catch up with that. There's a thing there that we might want to pay attention to as an organization. We might want to, we should do storytelling too. It always feels like we're catching up to some degree with in communications, but it's I think it's really driven by that human to human communities of interest component of social and digital. Sometimes you have to dig really deep to find that sort of pure truth, maybe, in social.
Right.
There are lots of dark alleys. Yeah. But I do think it's there, and I think that ability to connect with people has really driven that storytelling emphasis. And so, we have classes now. How Story Works is a class that we teach in the journalism school, and we use storytelling as a phrase and a word all the time to describe the work that we're doing across disciplines, right? Like, we're using that in journalism, and we're using that in PR, and we're using that in advertising. And so it's this idea that there's a kind of a flattening of that hierarchy of who gets to tell stories and why stories are important, that it's not professional storytellers, it's not just journalists and fiction writers and documentarians, but that work is going on across the communications disciplines.
Yeah, absolutely. And that resonates with so much that we see across disciplines in regard to digital media and how it has evolved. And kind of like what you were saying about connecting with people you otherwise wouldn't have, like, we see that not just with our interests, but with people and networking and professionalism, and people making new friends and developing new relationships. It's like the way that it has evolved is something that seems really massive if you can remember pre-social media age.
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
Like how we connected before all of this existed. Like, now we can connect with people across the world that we otherwise would have never crossed paths with. So of course it's going to impact storytelling and kind of just many things across many disciplines as well. So it's fascinating. So, for students or professionals trying to keep up with industry changes, what skills or mindsets are most important right now?
I've said this a few times, and I'll say it again because I always get on the soapbox. It's really about being curious and being kind of insatiably curious all the time.
Yeah.
It works in academia. As you're a student, you get to practice those skills of being curious about things. Like, as you're a professional, you have to, I would argue, that keeps you sharp and keeps you engaged in your work. It certainly does for me. I want to know how people think and how things work and why is that cultural moment so important right now? And so reading and watching and listening is crucial. And I think that it doesn't necessarily mean focusing in on your industry or your client or your specific niche. Because the world is not siloed, and so you have to really think, just find things that you're interested in, and that will feed your curiosity and help you figure out where to look for stuff and how to find things that are useful. I'm teaching a class right now that's a little bit outside of my professional expertise, and it's something that I love teaching, and I'm really excited about it because I get to be super curious. I get to be really, digging deep for examples and case studies, and because it's outside of my professional experience, I don't get to bring as much of my own work into the classroom, and so it's been a really fun way to expand my own knowledge and my own skill set and my own understanding of the topic. And I share that with the class, right? Like, this isn't my professional expertise. It's not yours either, because you're in my classroom. So a lot of this is we're learning together. Like, sure, I have a perspective as somebody who knows how to be a critical thinker around communication and how to bring these pieces how to build curriculum and how to bring these pieces into a classroom. But at the end of the day, it's just us trying to figure stuff out and trying to understand how it applies and how we can use this knowledge in the work as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an incredibly mindful approach to it as well. I remember shortly after my master's program, I was given a class to teach that was all on rhetoric, and I am not a rhetorician. And so I had to teach myself a lot as we were going along trying to find things. And I'm like, I'm failing them. But if you have that mindset of like, we're learning together, we're going to do
Mhm.
this together, it's way healthier, way more fun too, and
Yeah.
definitely more mindful. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So, at the core of your work, you say communication can move mountains. Can you share a moment or example where you've seen communication create real, tangible impact?
Gosh. This was the one I was going to think about more deeply before we jumped on today, because there's always a million examples floating around in my head when I talk about these. Like, pull one out of the pull one out of the archives. In terms of my own, one of the things, kind of areas that I'm particularly proud of, and because it's really had impact on organizations, is some of the issues management work that I've done, which is not super sexy, quite honestly. It's a lot of thinking and a lot of discussing. But I worked last summer, and if crises and issues management work well, nothing happens, which is also not super compelling in terms of an outcome. But in one example that comes to mind is last summer I worked with the Oregon wine industry, kind of industry associations across Oregon, around immigration enforcement issues. And so there was a immigration enforcement action that happened in McMinnville last May. I think it's been right at a year. Happened last May, and it was with a vineyard manager. And that really put the industry associations on kind of high alert. Like, how do they support the wineries and vineyards in Oregon? There are 1,500 wineries and vineyards in Oregon. It's a huge industry, and it relies on a lot of immigrant labor because it's agriculture, and so those things are true. And so the industry leadership, so this was the lobbying arm, the state association, the largest membership association, all came together and said, we need to make sure we're prepared, and we need to make sure that we have some unified statements and some unified messaging around this issue. So we worked pretty hard at developing a set of, and when you have multiple organizations coming together, consensus is challenging. So we worked really hard to get everybody on the same page and to build some resource guides and some fact sheets and some messaging and some how do you engage or not engage on social media, some stuff around safety. We facilitated webinars so that people could come on and chat with legal aid organizations that could help them understand what their rights and responsibilities were as employers, and what they could and couldn't do if there was an immigration enforcement action on their property. And it ended up that there wasn't, they felt really prepared. So when the media called, they were able to respond. Thankfully, there wasn't really any follow-on in immigration action in Oregon from that. That meant that there wasn't sort of a mountain to move per se. But bringing all of these organizations in under some consensus and providing training for independent wineries and vineyards, and and building these resource guides and creating media reports so that everybody knew what was being said was incredibly satisfying, and the organizations felt really prepared, which was my goal, right? Like that's the mountain that I needed to move was, oh no, we're scared, to, oh no, we're ready. Like we can do this. We have the right tools. And so that was an initiative that I think I'm particularly proud of, because it came together really effectively. And there was no follow-on crisis, right? Like we neutralized it because we were able to help the organizations feel ready.
That's amazing. Yes, it sounds like incredible work. Lots of in-depth, detailed work as well. So incredibly impressive on a very, timely but also sensitive topic and issue.
Yeah.
So it's like you're throwing yourself and you absolutely moved that mountain. That sounds like incredible work. So awesome.
Maybe
Well, thank
squish
you.
the mountain? I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, yeah, maybe that might be better.
Bury the mountain?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That might be better. But this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for hopping on an
Of
episode
course.
with me to talk about your amazing work. So informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about what you do and contributing to the discipline overall. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And that's our conversation with Kelli Matthews. One of the themes that stood out to me throughout this discussion is that effective communication isn't simply about crafting the perfect message. It's about building relationships, earning trust, and helping people make sense of complex situations. Whether we're talking about crisis communication, community engagement, leadership, or storytelling, communication works best when it's grounded in authenticity, clarity, and a genuine understanding of the audience. Kelli's perspective also reminds us that communication is never static. The platforms may change, the technologies may evolve, and the challenges may look different from one year to the next, but the fundamental goal remains the same: helping people connect, understand, and move forward together. As always, thank you for listening to Cultivate Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone interested in communication, leadership, public relations, or organizational strategy. Until then, keep cultivating conversations that matter.